Jake Martinez finished his dinner and looked at the clock on his kitchen wall. 7:30 in the evening. Time for his daily routine. He opened the cabinet under his sink and pulled out 3 metal bowls and a bag of dry cat food. His neighbors thought he was crazy. Why waste money on strays, they would ask. Jake never bothered to explain. He knew what it felt like to be hungry and alone. Growing up, Jake's family didn't have much money. There were nights when he went to bed with an empty stomach because there wasn't enough food for everyone. His mother would give her portion to Jake and his little sister, pretending she wasn't hungry. Jake remembered those nights clearly. They made him understand what suffering meant. Now, at 28 years old, Jake had a steady job at Rodriguez Auto Shop. He lived in a small apartment behind the main building in town. It wasn't fancy, but it was his. And every evening, he made sure the neighborhood stray cats didn't go hungry like he once did. Jake filled 2 bowls with dry cat food and 1 with fresh water. He walked out his back door and around the corner of the building. There, next to the old oak tree, he had created a feeding station. He placed the bowls in their usual spot and stepped back. "There you go, guys," he said softly to the empty air. "Dinner is served." Jake had been doing this for almost 2 years. At first, only 1 skinny orange cat showed up. Then came a black cat with white paws. Soon, word spread through the cat community, and Jake was feeding 5 regular visitors every night. He loved watching them eat. The way they approached carefully, always ready to run. How they would relax once they realized the food was really for them. Some of the cats had even started to trust him enough to let him pet them. As Jake turned to go back inside, something caught his eye. A bright green flash lit up the sky for just a moment. It was there and then gone, like a shooting star, but different. The light was too bright and too green to be a normal meteor. Jake stood in his backyard, looking up at the cloudy sky. He waited to see if the light would appear again. After 5 minutes of staring, he shrugged his shoulders. Probably just an airplane or a weather balloon. Strange things happened in the sky all the time. He went back inside and settled onto his couch to watch television. Jake worked hard all day fixing cars and trucks. His evenings were his time to relax. He liked watching old movies and reading repair manuals for different car models. The next morning, Jake woke up early as always. He worked from 7 in the morning until 6 at night, 6 days a week. Before getting ready for work, he checked. On the food bowls outside, all 3 bowls were empty and clean. The cats had enjoyed their meal, but something was different about the area around the oak tree. The ground was muddy from last night's rain, and Jake could see footprints in the soft dirt. He knelt down to look closer. These weren't cat paw prints. They looked almost human, but smaller and with a strange shape. The toes were longer than normal human toes, and there seemed to be 4 toes instead of 5. Kids playing pranks, Jake said to himself. Sometimes the neighborhood children would run around behind the buildings playing games and making noise. They probably saw the cat food and got curious. Jake refilled the bowls with fresh food and water. He didn't mind if some kids were eating the cat food. If they were hungry enough to eat food meant for cats, they probably needed it more than the cats did. At work that day, Jake told his boss Carlos about the strange footprints. Carlos laughed and said it was probably raccoons. "Those little bandits have weird hands," Carlos explained. "They leave prints that look almost human." That made sense to Jake. He had seen raccoons in the area before. They were smart animals that could open garbage cans and even simple latches. Raccoon prints would explain the almost human shape. For the next 2 days, Jake continued his routine. Every evening at 7:30, he put out fresh food and water. Every morning, the bowls were empty with those same strange footprints in the mud around the tree. On the 3rd day, Jake decided to be more careful. Instead of just dumping the old food, he examined the bowls closely. The cats usually left some food behind and made a mess while eating. But these bowls were completely clean, as if someone had washed them. Raccoons were messy eaters. They would scatter food around and leave dirty paw prints on the bowls. These bowls looked like they had been carefully cleaned by someone who didn't want to waste even a single piece of food. Jake started to feel curious and a little worried. What if it wasn't raccoons? What if someone was really hungry and eating cat food because they had no other choice? The thought bothered him all day while he worked. That evening, Jake made a decision. Instead of just putting out cat food, he added a sandwich wrapped in plastic, a bottle of water, and an apple. If a hungry person was eating the cat food, they deserved something better. He placed the extra food next to the regular bowls and went inside. But instead of watching television, Jake sat by his back window. He wanted to see who or what was eating the food. An hour passed, then 2 hours. Jake was starting to think nothing would happen when he heard a soft sound outside. It was like voices talking, but too quiet to understand the words. Jake moved closer to his window and peered out into the darkness. The moon was bright enough to see the oak tree and the food bowls, but he couldn't see anyone near them. The voices stopped. Jake waited and watched for another hour, but nothing happened. Finally, he gave up and went to bed. The next morning brought a surprise. Not only were all the bowls empty, but the sandwich, apple, and water bottle were gone too. In their place was something that made Jake stop and stare. Sitting on the ground where he had left the sandwich was a small pile of smooth, colorful stones. They were arranged in a perfect circle, as if someone had carefully placed them there as a gift. Jake picked up one of the stones and examined it. It was unlike any rock he had ever seen. The surface was smooth like glass, but it felt warm in his hand. The color seemed to shift from blue to purple as he turned it in the sunlight. These were definitely not normal rocks from his neighborhood. Someone had left them on purpose, someone who wanted to say thank you for the food. Jake smiled as he collected the stones. Whatever was eating his food offerings, it was intelligent and grateful, and it was probably a lot more interesting than raccoons. Jake spent the next few days thinking about the strange stones. He kept them on his kitchen table and looked at them every morning while drinking his coffee. The colors continued to shift and change in the light, unlike anything he had ever seen before. He decided to leave better food for his mysterious visitors. Instead of cat food, Jake prepared actual meals. He made extra sandwiches, packed fresh fruit, and filled large bottles with clean water. Each evening, he added something new to see what would be taken. Everything disappeared by morning, and each time new gifts appeared in return. More colorful stones, pieces of wood carved into interesting shapes, and what looked like drawings scratched onto pieces of tree bark. The drawings were simple but clearly made by someone intelligent. They showed stick figures and basic shapes. Some looked like maps of the local area. Others seemed to show the night sky with stars and moons. After a week of this exchange, Jake became more curious than ever. He needed to see who was taking his food and leaving these incredible gifts. On Friday evening, he made his usual food delivery, but then hid behind a large bush near his back door. Jake waited in the darkness for 2 hours. His legs were getting stiff, and he was starting to think about giving up when he heard those soft voices again. This time they were closer and clearer. The language was completely unfamiliar. It sounded musical, like singing, but the words meant nothing to Jake. He carefully pushed aside some branches to get a better view of the oak tree. What he saw made his heart stop. 3 small figures were gathered around his food bowls. At first glance, they looked like children. But as Jake's eyes adjusted to the moonlight, he realized these were not human children. Their skin was pale blue, almost glowing in the darkness. They were smaller than adult humans, maybe 4 feet tall, with thin bodies and long arms. Their heads were larger than normal, and even from a distance Jake could see that their eyes were huge and dark. The 3 figures were clearly female, though their features were different from human women. They wore clothes that looked torn and dirty, as if they had been traveling for a long time. Their hair was white or silver, and seemed to move on its own, like it was floating in water. Jake watched in amazement as the 3 beings carefully shared the food he had left. They ate slowly and quietly, always watching the area around them as if they expected danger. One of them had silver markings on her forehead that caught the moonlight. She seemed to be the leader of the group. The youngest-looking one was more curious than the others. She kept looking around with wide eyes, taking in everything around her. The third one moved carefully as if she was hurt. She favored her left leg and winced when she put weight on it. Jake realized he was looking at alien beings, real aliens, on Earth, in his backyard. His mind raced with questions. Where did they come from? How did they get here? Why were they hiding behind his apartment building eating food meant for stray cats? As Jake watched, the curious young one suddenly looked directly at his hiding spot. Her large dark eyes seemed to see right through the bush where he was hidden. She made a soft sound and the other two immediately looked in his direction. Jake froze. He tried to stay perfectly still, hoping they couldn't actually see him. But it was too late. The leader stood up quickly and moved protectively in front of the other two. She made sharp clicking sounds, clearly warning the others about danger. All three aliens stared at Jake's hiding place. He realized there was no point in hiding anymore. Slowly, carefully, Jake stood up and stepped out from behind the bush. The aliens immediately stepped back, ready to run. The injured one tried to move quickly but stumbled and nearly fell. The leader caught her and helped her stand while never taking her eyes off Jake. Jake raised both hands in the air, palms forward in what he hoped was a universal peaceful gesture. "It's okay," he said softly. "I'm not going to hurt you. I'm the one who's been leaving the food." The aliens didn't understand his words, but they seemed to recognize that his voice was gentle. They stopped moving away but remained ready to flee at any moment. Jake pointed to himself and then to the food bowls. "Me," he said, pointing to his chest. "Food," he said, pointing to the bowls. He repeated this several times, trying to communicate that he was the source of the meals they had been eating. The leader tilted her head to one side, studying Jake carefully. She said something in her musical language to the other two. They responded with soft sounds that seemed like questions. Jake continued to speak in a calm, quiet voice. "I know you're hungry. I want to help. I won't tell anyone about you. You're safe here." Even though they couldn't understand the words, the aliens seemed to sense Jake's friendly intentions. The leader took a small step forward, though she kept the other two behind her. Jake slowly reached into his pocket and pulled out an energy bar he had been saving for later. He unwrapped it and placed it on the ground between them, then stepped back to show he meant no harm. The leader looked at the energy bar, then back at Jake. After a long moment, she moved forward and picked up the food. She examined it carefully, smelled it, and then took a small bite. Her eyes widened with surprise and what looked like pleasure. She shared the energy bar with the other two aliens. They ate it quickly, clearly hungry despite the meal they had just finished. Jake smiled and nodded. He pointed to his apartment building. "I live here," he said, speaking slowly and clearly. "Every day I bring food. For you." The leader studied Jake's face for several minutes. She seemed to be making a decision about whether or not to trust him. Finally, she reached into a pouch on her torn clothing and pulled out one of the colorful stones. She held it out toward Jake, clearly offering it as a gift. Jake stepped forward, carefully, and accepted the stone, holding it gently in his palm. "Thank you," he said, looking directly into her large, dark eyes. "It's beautiful." The alien leader made a soft sound that might have been the beginning of a smile. Then she turned to the other two and spoke in their musical language. They gathered up the remaining food and began to move toward the woods behind Jake's apartment. Before they disappeared into the trees, the leader looked back at Jake one more time. She touched her hand to her forehead in what seemed like a gesture of gratitude, then followed the others into the darkness. Jake stood alone in his backyard, holding the alien stone and trying to process what had just happened. He had made contact with beings from another world. They were refugees, survivors of something terrible, and they had chosen to trust him. As he walked back to his apartment, Jake knew his life had just changed forever. Tomorrow evening, he would be ready with more food and maybe some basic medical supplies for the injured one. He had a feeling this was just the beginning of an incredible friendship. The next evening, Jake prepared more carefully than ever before. He made sandwiches with extra meat and cheese, packed fresh fruit and vegetables, and filled several bottles with clean water. He also gathered a warm blanket, basic first aid supplies, and a small solar-powered radio he thought they might find interesting. When 7:30 arrived, Jake carried everything to the oak tree. Instead of hiding, he placed the items out in the open and then sat down on a nearby log. He wanted the aliens to see that he was not trying to trick them or hide from them. Jake waited patiently. An hour passed before he heard the soft musical voices approaching through the woods. The three aliens emerged from the trees, moving more slowly than before. They seemed less frightened, but still very careful. The leader stepped forward first. In the better light, Jake could see her features more clearly. Her pale blue skin had a soft glow to it, and her silver hair moved like it was floating in a gentle breeze. The markings on her forehead looked like intricate patterns, almost like tattoos but natural. She looked at Jake sitting quietly on the log, then at the food and supplies he had brought. She spoke to the other two in their flowing language. Jake decided to give them names in his mind to make it easier to think about them. The leader he called Luna, because of her silver markings that reminded him of moonlight. The curious younger one he named Bella, because she had a beautiful, innocent way of looking at everything around her. The injured one he called Hope, because despite her pain, she seemed determined to keep going. Luna approached the food slowly, while Bella and Hope waited near the tree line. She examined each item carefully, picking up the radio and turning it over in her hands with obvious interest. "It plays music," Jake said softly, pointing to the radio. He turned it on and adjusted the volume to a low setting. Soft classical music filled the evening air. All three aliens stopped moving and stared at the radio with wonder. They had never heard human music before. Bella stepped closer, her large eyes wide with amazement. Even Hope forgot her pain for a moment and moved forward to listen. Jake turned off the radio and placed it back with the other gifts. "You can keep it," he said, making giving gestures with his hands. "It's yours." Luna picked up the first aid kit and opened it. She seemed to understand what the bandages and antiseptic were for. She looked at Hope, then back at Jake. Her expression seemed to ask if he knew about medical care. Jake nodded and pointed to Hope's injured leg. He made gentle gestures showing he wanted to help. Luna hesitated for a long moment, then spoke rapidly to Hope in their language. Hope looked frightened but also hopeful. After several minutes of discussion, Luna made a decision. She helped Hope move closer to Jake. Up close, Jake could see that Hope's leg was badly injured. Her clothing was torn around a wound that looked infected and painful. Jake moved very slowly and carefully. He opened the first aid kit and showed each item to Luna before using it. He cleaned Hope's wound with antiseptic, which made her wince, but she didn't pull away. Then he applied antibiotic ointment and wrapped the injury with clean bandages. Throughout the process, Luna watched Jake's every move while Bella stood guard. When Jake finished, Hope tested her leg and seemed surprised that it felt better. She looked at Jake with what was clearly gratitude and spoke several words in their musical language. "You're welcome," Jake replied, even though he knew she couldn't understand him. Over the following weeks, this became their routine. Every evening, Jake would bring food and small gifts. The aliens would arrive after dark and spend time eating and examining whatever he had brought. Gradually, they became more comfortable with his presence. Jake learned things about them by watching carefully. They were very intelligent, able to figure out how human tools worked just by examining them. They were also incredibly gentle with each other, always sharing food equally and helping each other when needed. Luna began to understand some basic English words. Jake would point to objects and say their names repeatedly. "Water," he would say, holding up a bottle. "Food," he would say, pointing to a sandwich. Luna was a quick learner and soon began repeating the words back to him. The aliens also taught Jake some of their language. They had beautiful words for simple things. Their word for friend sounded like gentle singing. Their word for gratitude was like wind chimes in a soft breeze. Bella was the most curious about human technology. She loved the solar radio and would carry it with her everywhere. Jake brought her other small devices, a flashlight, a digital watch, and a simple calculator. She studied each one with intense concentration and seemed to understand how they worked. Hope's leg healed quickly with proper medical care. As she recovered, Jake learned that she was actually very strong and athletic. She could climb trees easily and move through the forest without making any sound. Her injury had been holding her back, but now she was able to keep up with the others. The aliens began leaving more elaborate gifts for Jake. They brought him tools made from materials he didn't recognize, small devices that seemed to be broken, pieces of advanced technology and artwork that was incredibly beautiful despite being created with simple materials. One evening, Luna surprised Jake by speaking his name. "Jake," she said clearly, pointing to him. Then she pointed to herself and said a word in her language that sounded like music. "Your name?" Jake asked, pointing to her. She nodded and repeated the musical word. It was too complex for Jake to pronounce correctly, so he continued calling her Luna. But the fact that she had shared her real name felt like a major step forward in their friendship. The breakthrough in their relationship came when Jake witnessed Hope collapse during one of their evening meetings. She had been feeling weak for several days, and Jake suspected her injury had led to a more serious infection. Without thinking about the consequences, Jake rushed forward and caught Hope as she fell. Luna moved to protect her friend but stopped when she saw that Jake was trying to help, not harm. Jake checked Hope's temperature and pulse using skills he had learned in a first aid class years earlier. She was burning with fever and clearly very sick. Jake knew she needed medicine stronger than anything in his basic first aid kit. "Hospital," Jake said to Luna, but she looked confused. He tried to explain using gestures that Hope needed professional medical care. Luna seemed to understand but shook her head fearfully. Jake realized that Luna was afraid of other humans. She trusted him, but she didn't know if other people would be as kind. This was a problem Jake needed to solve carefully. He helped Luna carry Hope back to his apartment. For the first time, the aliens entered a human building. They looked around with wonder and nervousness at Jake's simple living space. Jake laid Hope on his couch and covered her with blankets. Then he called in sick to work and spent the next 3 days nursing Hope back to health. He used every medical resource he could find online, treating her fever and infection with over-the-counter medicines. Luna and Bella never left Hope's side during her recovery. They sang to her in their musical language and held her hands when the fever made her restless. Jake was moved by their obvious love for each other. When Hope finally recovered, all 3 aliens looked at Jake with complete trust and gratitude. They had seen him risk his own safety and comfort to help them. They knew now that not all humans were dangerous. That evening, as Hope rested comfortably, Luna approached Jake with something she had never shown him before. It was a small device covered in symbols he didn't recognize. She handed it to him and spoke a long sentence in her language. Jake didn't understand the words, but he could tell from her tone that Luna was about to share something very important, something that would help him understand who they really were and why they had come to Earth. Luna held the small device carefully in her hands. It was about the size of Jake's phone, but made from a material that seemed to shift colors like the stones they had been giving him. Strange symbols covered its surface, glowing faintly in the dim light of Jake's living room. She touched several of the symbols in a specific pattern. The device hummed softly and projected a 3-dimensional image into the air above it. Jake gasped and nearly fell off his chair. He had never seen technology like this before. The image showed a beautiful planet with purple oceans and silver continents. 3 moons hung in a pink sky, and cities of crystal towers stretched across the land. It was clearly the aliens' homeworld. "Zephyria," Luna said slowly, pointing to the image. Then she touched her chest and repeated the word. This was where she came from. The image changed to show the planet's sun. It was larger than Earth's sun and glowed with a soft blue light. But as Jake watched, the sun began to dim and change color. It turned red, then orange, then started to collapse in on itself. Luna's voice became sad as she continued her explanation. Even though Jake couldn't understand all her words, he could see what was happening in the images. The sun was dying, and when it collapsed, it destroyed everything in the solar system. The next images showed chaos and destruction. The beautiful crystal cities crumbled as earthquakes shook the planet. The purple oceans boiled away. The 3 moons were torn apart by gravitational forces. Jake realized he was watching the death of an entire world. But then the images showed something hopeful. Thousands of small ships escaped from the dying planet, carrying survivors away into space. Luna pointed to one particular ship and then to herself, Bella, and Hope. They had been among the refugees who fled their doomed home. The image changed to show their journey through space. Jake saw their ship traveling between stars, searching for a new place to live. But something went wrong. The ship began to break apart, damaged by the long journey and lack of resources. Finally, the image showed their ship crashing on Earth. It came down in the forest behind Jake's apartment building. On the same night he had seen the green flash in the sky. The three aliens had been the only survivors of their particular escape pod. When the image ended, Luna put the device away and looked at Jake with tears in her large dark eyes. Bella moved closer and held Luna's hand. Hope, though still weak from her recent illness, reached out to comfort her friends. Jake sat in stunned silence for several minutes, trying to process what he had just learned. These weren't just aliens visiting Earth. They were refugees, the last survivors of a dead world. They had lost everything and everyone they had ever known. "I'm so sorry," Jake said softly, even though he knew they couldn't fully understand him. "I'm sorry about your home. I'm sorry about your people." Luna seemed to understand his tone and nodded sadly. Then she began to speak again, using the English words she had learned mixed with her own language. Jake had to listen carefully to follow her story. She explained that they were not adults despite their intelligence and abilities. In their society, they were considered young people, roughly equivalent to human teenagers. When the evacuation began, families were separated in the chaos. Luna, Bella, and Hope had ended up on the same escape ship by chance, not because they were related. They had been traveling through space for months before their ship crashed on Earth. During that time, they had intercepted human radio signals and learned about Earth's inhabitants. Most of what they heard frightened them. The signals were full of news about wars, violence, and hatred between different groups of humans. Based on these broadcasts, they expected humans to be dangerous and aggressive. When their ship crashed, they decided to hide in the forest and avoid contact with any Earth inhabitants. They had been surviving by eating plants and small animals, staying weak and hungry because they didn't know which Earth foods were safe. Then Jake started leaving food for what he thought were stray cats. The aliens smelled the food and realized it was safe to eat because they had seen Earth animals eating it. At first, they only took the food when they were sure no humans were around, but Jake's consistent kindness puzzled them. Every night, he left fresh food without expecting anything in return. When they began leaving gifts as a way to say thank you, he accepted them gracefully and left even better food in response. Luna explained that this kind of behavior was completely different from what they had heard in the radio broadcasts. Jake was showing them that humans could be generous and caring, not just violent and selfish. Hope spoke up, using her limited English to tell Jake how grateful they were for the medical care he had given her. Without his help, her infection might have killed her. She had never expected a human to risk his own safety to help an alien. Bella showed Jake the solar radio he had given her. She had figured out how to modify it to pick up signals from deep space. She was hoping to contact other survivor ships that might still be traveling between the stars. So far, she had not been successful, but she continued to try every night. Jake asked them about their damaged technology. Luna brought out several broken devices and showed him the internal components. To Jake's surprise, while the technology was much more advanced than anything humans had created, it operated on principles he could understand. It was like looking at a car engine from 50 years in the future. Different, but not completely alien. "I think I can help fix some of this," Jake told them, examining a device that looked like it might be a communication system. "I'm good with machines. Maybe not as good as your people were, but I might be able to get it working again." Luna's eyes lit up with hope. If they could repair their communication device, they might be able to contact other survivors. They might learn if any of their people had found a safe world to live on. But as Jake studied their technology, he realized there was a bigger problem they hadn't considered yet. The aliens couldn't hide on Earth forever. Eventually, someone would discover them. The government probably already knew their ship had crashed, based on radar and satellite data. Jake thought about the green flash he had seen the night of their crash. If he had noticed it, other people probably had too. There might already be people looking for them. "You're not safe hiding in the forest," Jake told them. "Other humans will find you eventually. We need to think about what to do when that happens." Luna looked frightened at the thought of meeting other humans. She trusted Jake completely now, but she was still afraid of how other people might react to finding aliens on Earth. Jake made a decision that would change all their lives. "You don't have to hide anymore," he said firmly. "You can stay here, with me. This is your home now for as long as you need it." He explained that his apartment wasn't very big, but they could make it work. He would help them repair their technology and contact other survivors. More importantly, he would protect them from any humans who might want to hurt them or study them like laboratory animals. For the first time since their world died, Luna, Bella, and Hope felt like they might have found a real home. Not just a place to hide, but a place where they were wanted and cared for. Outside, unknown to any of them, satellite sensors had detected unusual energy readings coming from Jake's neighborhood. Government agents were already on their way to investigate. Jake's promise to protect his new alien family was about to be tested in ways he couldn't imagine. Jake woke up early the next morning to find Bella already awake, sitting by the window and watching the sunrise. She had been fascinated by Earth's single sun and the way it painted the sky in colors that were different from her homeworld. "Good morning," Jake said softly, not wanting to wake Luna and Hope, who were still sleeping on the couch and floor mattress he had set up for them. Bella smiled and repeated the words back to him. Her English was improving quickly. All three aliens were remarkably fast learners. Jake made breakfast for everyone, adjusting the recipes to avoid foods that might be harmful to alien digestive systems. Over the past few days, he had learned that they could eat most human foods but had trouble with anything too spicy or acidic. As they ate together around Jake's small kitchen table, Luna showed him more of their broken technology. Jake had spent the previous evening studying the devices and was amazed by their design. The aliens had created tools that were incredibly efficient and powerful despite being very small. "I think I can fix this communication device," Jake told Luna, pointing to a silver box covered in symbols. "It needs new power cells and some rewiring, but the basic components are still good." Luna's eyes brightened with hope. If they could contact other survivor ships, they might find more of their people. They might even find adults who could take care of them properly. Jake had been thinking about this possibility all night. Part of him would be sad to see Luna, Bella, and Hope leave. He had grown attached to them very quickly. But he knew they deserved to be with their own people if any had survived. As Jake worked on repairing the communication device, using tools from his auto shop and components from old radios and computers, the aliens helped by explaining how their technology was supposed to function. Despite the language barrier, they managed to work together effectively. Bella had modified Jake's solar radio even further. She could now pick up faint signals from deep space, though most of them were just background noise from distant stars. Still, she listened hopefully every day for any sign of other survivors. Hope was feeling much stronger and had begun exploring the area around Jake's apartment. She was incredibly athletic and could move through the forest like a shadow. She acted as their scout, watching for any signs that other humans were looking for them. On their 5th day together, Hope returned from one of her scouting trips with disturbing news. She had seen unmarked black vehicles parked on the roads around their area. Men in dark suits were walking through the forest with strange electronic devices, clearly searching for something. "Government agents," Jake said grimly. He had been expecting this. The crash site would have left evidence that couldn't be hidden forever. Luna looked frightened. Based on the radio broadcasts they had intercepted, government agents were not known for being kind to outsiders. "We run?" she asked in her careful English. Jake shook his head. "No more running, no more hiding." He looked at each of them seriously. "You're part of my family now. I won't let anyone hurt you." That afternoon, 3 black SUVs pulled up in front of Jake's apartment building. A dozen agents in dark suits got out along with several people carrying scientific equipment. They clearly meant business. Jake told Luna, Bella, and Hope to stay inside and trust him. Then he walked outside to meet the agents before they could surround his building. Jake Martinez? Asked a stern-looking woman who seemed to be in charge. I'm Agent Patricia Williams with a special government task force. We need to ask you some questions about unusual activity in this area. What kind of unusual activity? Jake asked, trying to sound casual. Agent Williams studied Jake's face carefully. Satellite data shows that an unidentified object crashed in the forest behind your building 6 days ago. The impact site shows evidence of advanced technology. We have reason to believe that object was not of human origin. Jake looked the agent in the eyes and made a decision that would change everything. You're right, it wasn't human. And before you do anything else, you need to understand something important. He gestured toward his apartment. There are 3 survivors from that crash. They're children. They're refugees from a destroyed world. They've lost everything and everyone they ever knew, and they're under my protection. The agents tensed and several reached for their weapons. Agent Williams held up a hand to stop them. Mr. Martinez, if what you're saying is true, these beings could pose a significant threat to national security. The only threat they pose, Jake said firmly, is to your assumptions about what aliens might be like. They're not invaders or conquerors. They're scared kids who need help. Jake continued speaking, his voice growing stronger and more passionate. 6 days ago, I was just a guy who left food out for stray cats. But those 3 beings in there have taught me something about what it really means to be human. He pointed toward the forest where their ship had crashed. They could have used their advanced technology to take what they needed from us. They could have demanded that we help them or threatened us if we refused. Instead, they hid in the woods eating scraps and trying not to bother anyone. Agent Williams listened without interrupting, but Jake could see doubt in her eyes. When I found them, Jake continued, they were starving and injured, but they were still grateful for any kindness shown to them. They gave me gifts made from rocks and sticks because it was all they had. They shared their food equally, even when there wasn't enough. They risked their own safety to take care of each other. Jake's voice became emotional as he thought about everything he had witnessed. One of them was badly injured, and the others never left her side. They sang to her and held her hands when she was in pain. They showed me what real family looks like. He looked directly at Agent Williams. I know you have a job to do. I know there are protocols and procedures, but before you make any decisions about those 3 beings, you need to meet them. You need to see who they really are. Agent Williams was quiet for a long moment. Then she surprised Jake by asking, Do you have children, Mr. Martinez? No, Jake replied. But I was a child once. I know what it's like to be hungry and scared and alone. I know what it means when someone shows you kindness when you need it most. I have 2 daughters, Agent Williams said softly, 8 and 10 years old. She looked toward Jake's apartment. If they were lost and alone on a foreign world, I would hope someone would take care of them. Jake nodded. That's all I'm asking. Give them a chance to show you who they are before you decide what to do with them. After several minutes of discussion, with her team, Agent Williams agreed to meet the aliens. Jake went inside first to prepare Luna, Bella, and Hope for what was about to happen. More humans are coming, he told them gently. They're not bad people, but they're scared of what they don't understand. I need you to show them the same kindness you showed me. When Agent Williams entered Jake's apartment with 2 other agents, she was clearly surprised by what she saw. The 3 aliens looked exactly like what Jake had described. Young, frightened, but trying to be brave. Luna stepped forward and spoke carefully in English. Hello. I am sorry for coming to your world without permission. We had no choice, our home is gone. Bella held up the modified radio she had been working on. I try to find our people in the stars. I do not want to cause trouble for humans. Hope, despite being the shyest of the 3, moved to stand protectively near Jake. Jake saved my life. He is good human. He is family now. Agent Williams looked at the 3 aliens for a long time. Jake could see her mental image of dangerous invaders crumbling as she realized she was looking at children who had lost everything. After an hour of careful conversation, Agent Williams made a decision that surprised everyone, including her own team. Instead of taking the aliens into government custody, she proposed a different solution. A new program would be created, with Jake as the official guardian of the three aliens. They would live quietly in his apartment under government protection and observation. In exchange, they would share their knowledge to help humanity prepare for peaceful contact with other alien species that might visit Earth in the future. "This is completely unprecedented," one of the other agents protested. "Good," Agent Williams replied. "Maybe it's time we tried something unprecedented." 6 months later, Jake's life had changed in ways he never could have imagined. His small apartment had been expanded with government funding to accommodate his new family. Luna, Bella, and Hope had learned to speak English fluently and were teaching Jake and several government scientists about their advanced technology. Bella had successfully contacted 2 other survivor ships. One was already on its way to Earth, carrying 43 more refugees from Zephyria. The other was headed toward a distant planet that might be suitable for colonization. Hope had become the group's ambassador, working with Agent Williams to develop protocols for peaceful first contact with other alien species. Her natural diplomacy and understanding of different cultures made her perfect for the job. Luna had taken on the role of teacher, helping human scientists understand Zephyrian technology. Her patient explanations were leading to breakthroughs in clean energy and space travel that would benefit all of humanity. But the best part of Jake's new life happened every evening at 7